After Cast, the college football podcast. As usual, I'm Aaron, joined by my two friends, Ryan
Hey guys.
and Chandler.
Hi, gentlemen.
And today we're also joined by our special guest, Will, coming to give us a perspective on a college football fan from a former player perspective. Normally, this is where we kick over to the Raction News Desk, but our news team was out on vacation this week, and so was the entirety of anything happening in college football. So we don't have any news to share, but that also leaves us more time to talk to Will here, get things going. So Chandler, why don't you walk us on what we brought Will to talk to us about on?
Yeah, I apologize. You can take it out of Ryan and I's pay. We didn't get any news this week, so I know it'll be reflected in our quarterly report. Yeah. I mean, Will, I appreciate you coming on. You've been a family friend for a long time, and you have a very unique perspective on college football, being a former player. So happy to have you on, and I'll kick it to you to give a little background about yourself, and we'll jump right into it.
Yeah, everyone. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. Like Chandler said, me and him have known each other since early high school. Both grew up in the same small town, played football, a much smaller school than he played baseball at in our same hometown. Essentially, my football story is I grew up in the middle of nowhere in the desert in California on a tiny Air Force base where there were no sports I was able to play kind of at like an organized level other than your kind of like co-rec soccer, your like mob ball kind of bundled up with everybody. And as soon as we moved from that Air Force base, my kind of first instinct was I have to play football as soon as possible. And so I started playing football when I was 10. Living out in Ohio was my first time wearing a helmet, and I thought I wanted to quit because it was too tight, the kind of thing, like your head hurts as soon as you put it on and you think this is what a concussion feels like, right? And so I can't say I was like hooked on football right away. The process was not necessarily fun, but I just like kept kind of coming back. It was like this compulsion of whatever the football equivalent is of hoop dreams or whatever it was. I just kept coming back. Moved a couple different times, played some football out in Las Vegas and the Heat, eventually settled in Florida where Chandler and I are from. I mean, that's really where things kind of stuck. I am, like a proud football alum of Rocky Bayou Christian School in Niceville, Florida. That's where I played all through 8th grade up until graduating from high school. Had an incredible experience there, had a really small coaching staff that I'm so close to, kind of to this day. Those kind of people really, just kind of forming my life in a lot of ways. And just kind of giving me a love for the game and also kind of just like a better understanding of what it does for me just as a person. I'm in my own kind of character. I had the opportunity in kind of a really strange way after my sophomore year, just kind of like developing a lot really quickly at that point and starting to like experience a lot of success kind of in the back end of high school and kind of late blooming in that way. Grew a lot, understood the game a lot better, stopped kind of overthinking things, started to get some attention from smaller schools. And the kind of like D3 recruiting process is very strange, especially as you are kind of like hoping that you might play at a higher level. Teams are calling you. And then eventually one day, I kind of, after my senior year was over, got the call that I had a walk-on spot at my dream academic school, which is obviously Georgia Tech here in Atlanta, where I live now, post-grad. So got the opportunity to walk on in the fall of 2020, which is kind of a wrinkle in my college football story of when I played that I'm sure we'll talk about more. But yeah, I got there in 2020, was a walk-on under Jeff Collins, former DC at your team of choice, Aaron. I'm sure you remember the Jeff Collins era there. Had a really hard experience, but a really great one. Played for that season and then kind of, retired, so to speak, whatever you can say at 19 to focus on school. Kind of ended up finishing my bachelor's and master's at Georgia Tech. And so really thankful for that opportunity to kind of do that alongside football. But yeah, I mean, up until really this point in my life, football's just been a huge part of the story for most of my life as the athlete and then eventually over the last few years as a fan. So yeah, really happy to be here to talk about both parts of that.
So what did your walk-on experience look like? So I know that's something that not a lot of people know about the process and especially the recruiting in general. So how does that work when you get the call? How do you get that kind of recruiting and what happens when you get on campus? Like, walk us through it.
Yeah, it's a good question, and some things that I can tell you about that should have happened that didn't happen just because of obviously being recruited during a pandemic and all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
It works a little bit differently depending on what kind of school you're at. I had a particular receivers coach. I was a tight end in college. I played, at a small school, I played snaps at every position, but it was primarily like a running back. But, you kind of find out as you're being scouted that you're maybe too tall to play running back at the Power 5 level and too slow to play wide out. And so you kind of settle on tight end where you're like, oh, I'm big, kind of, like duh. And so it happens differently for every different kind of person. A small school like mine, my receivers coach, Rob Hubbs, who kind of always had my back in general. He kind of sat me down at the beginning of the year and kind of told me like, don't worry about the D1 stuff. Don't worry about the offer stuff. Just play well this season and I'll take care of it kind of behind the scenes. And so my process was kind of hands off in ways that not everybody's was. Also hands off in the sense that like I wasn't like being thrown like D1 scholarships left and right that demanded my attention. Like I had interest from like kind of non-Power 5 D1 schools that required a little bit more like camp visits and talking to coaches and things like that, but they weren't necessarily academically aligned with the things I was interested in. And so my Georgia Tech process actually really just happened. I woke up one day to a screenshot of an email from Rob, just kind of that was from the recruiting director at Georgia Tech that just said, hey, we've seen the film, can't make any promises, but he's got a spot if he wants it, And so that was really the entirety of my recruitment process to Georgia Tech. 'Cause I woke up one day, I had an email and I was, a Power 5 player. And so then that day I had like a postseason workout that I was at for my high school. And that's kind of like the day you show up, and we were talking about it pre-show, but I'm the first person to complete the football program at my alma mater and play in the Power 5. Still am, I guess. Hopefully that doesn't stay true for much longer. I'd love to see that not be a thing anymore. But yeah, like when you show up, you feel like $1 million because they roll out the red carpet for you. Everybody's heard the news. I'm going through the workout, feeling like $1 million. We're doing a sprint workout at the end of the workout to close it out, or my hamstring on like the last rep of the day. And so this is like February 2020 at this point. 2 weeks later, I have not told Georgia Tech about my injury because I just wasn't sure what the implications were that far out. I was pretty sure I'd be recovered by the time I had to report. And so originally the process is once you get your spot, I got a call from the lead recruiter at Georgia Tech. He invited me out to campus. I was supposed to do a recruiting visit with Chandler, your old classmate, Wanye Thomas from Niceville, as my kind of, when they recruit you for these things, they usually try to find a personal connection either to your hometown or somebody who is like, kind of 6 degrees of separation away from you. And for me, that was Wanye. And as I was walking out the door to drive up to Atlanta from where I was for my recruiting visit, I get a call from the lead recruiter who says, hey, have you left yet? And I said, yeah, I'm walking out the door right now. And he says, you should probably turn around. It's like, we're all leaving campus right now for this COVID thing. We don't know when we'll be back. You should probably just stay home. And so I was, no kidding, in my front door walking out to get in the car to drive, set my bag down, close the door. And then, you're kind of couched with an injury plus a pandemic for the next few months. And so that really is kind of the bulk of the recruiting process. For some people, it's really intensive. If they want to come see you play in high school, that might be a thing if you're kind of like in consideration for like a scholarship at a competitive position. Right. Like, they're not extending a lot of offers to tight ends in general. And so a lot of those guys come through these D1 programs as walk-ons. And so for me, that process was hands off. They saw my film. They thought it was enough to kind of develop in the background over the course of the season and kind of just see what happens. And then that was really it. Yeah.
So did you go on a visit there, or is that going to be your first time up there?
My first time up there was the day before my first practice, just because that was when the campus opened back up for like in any capacity, right? Like I think Georgia Tech probably suspended classes that year from like mid-February and moved everything online and didn't open any campus operations again until early August. And during that recruiting process, like we didn't know when that was going to be. And so I kind of just heard, hey, when you're allowed to come back, we'll call you. And they called me and said, hey, like probably 2 weeks from now, we'll be open. So be ready to come out in 2 weeks. Then a couple of days later, I get a text from them that says, hey, it's actually tomorrow. Can you be here tomorrow? I'm, sitting in my house, mentally preparing to be in Niceville for a couple more weeks, get the text, pack my whole life up. I'm out the door that night. I'm on campus the next morning. And then, yeah,
I can't even imagine how much anxiety that generated at that age.
Yeah, I think that it probably unlocked some new anxieties for me about being late to things and missing things, whatever it is, right? But like, as an 18-year-old who has obviously, kind of never left for school, right? Like, I think that there's this perception from college football fans that these guys are just adults and professionals. And to an extent we are, right? Like we're spending like the equivalent of like a full-time job playing football, but we're also like, just like children over 6 foot tall, like that is kind of like what part of this amounts to, right? Like I was not any less young than the average 18-year-old. I was just like bigger, So that's a huge life change to happen really suddenly. And so legitimately for walk-ons and for scholarship athletes, for everybody, like that actually just kind of leaving home. And in the case of those of us that, graduated in 2020, like really suddenly, is a huge part of the like adversity that you're overcoming right away.
Well, and that would lead me to a question that I think a lot of people either glancingly think about or don't think about at all, is that a lot of these, athletes that are coming in are 18-year-old, as you're saying, an 18-year-old young man going into a program like that. How much of an impact does the staff have to providing that structure for a young person out on their own, in a lot of cases, from various different walks of life, coming in and having that for
Yeah, I
them?
think the average answer that a player would give you is too much structure.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I'll really never forget is when I showed up on campus. I was checked into the, student athlete dorms because we've got, at most campuses, Georgia Tech isn't really any different. In the Power Five, there's some kind of controls on where on campus you can stay, who you can stay with, if you're allowed to live off campus, if you're not. So I check into the student athlete dorms, but one of the things that's waiting for me there when I check in is like a pamphlet that basically it's like, it doesn't even really feel real. It feels kind of like horror movie coded a little bit, but it's just like cheesy, like cartoonish pamphlet that basically is the effect of like, so you're a Division I athlete, right? And you open it up, and there's like a pie chart on the inside of it, and it says like, imagine this is 100% of your time, like waking, sleeping, studying, doing whatever. And there's a first little line on the graph that is like maybe like 25%. They're like, this is how much time Division III players spend on their sport. And there's like one that's like a little bit farther. And they're like, this is how much time Division II players spend on their sport. There's a final ring that like covers like the whole thing. And they're like, this is you. And you're like, oh, okay. And so you keep reading. And you're like, well, and they're like, this will give you everything you need to like manage as a student athlete. And there's probably some ways, right? Like I obviously played football for a lot less time than the average like guy that comes into the Power Five. Like a lot more people leave before their eligibility is up than you'd think, either because of like wanting to focus on school or having different career paths or injuries or whatever, right? The kind of like finishing rate, so to speak, is a lot lower than you'd think. But the guys who stayed for a lot longer remember this process better than me. But in some ways, my like really short college football experience makes some of these memories really vivid, even if they're a little bit like exaggerated. But the thing that I'll never forget is opening that pamphlet. And like one of the first things that it says on there, kind of like your lifestyle non-negotiables, right? It's like, be on time to every class, be on time to every practice. And the last one on there is like, make sure that you get at least 6 hours of sleep a night, non-negotiable. You turn the page on the pamphlet. The next thing it says, like, things to be aware of. One there is, you will never sleep 6 hours in a night. And it was like, okay, so I think my life is over, right? But like, these coaches do provide a lot of support. And obviously, like, my tight ends coach was really excellent form of support. Obviously, getting on campus really like kind of terrifying form of support at first because everything's just so unfamiliar and like, constant. Like when you make a mistake, it seems like the worst thing that's ever happened to you. But they do a lot of work to just kind of provide you the structure that makes college football seem like terrifying when you first get there, but eventually after a couple months, it kind of realizes it's the thing that makes college football possible. For us, that was an app. Like every day I would open my app and it just told me where I needed to be pretty much every second of the day from, 5:36 in the morning until 8 p.m. when meetings were over. It's just like, you knew what was going on. You knew when you had to be there, all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, like pretty much, most of your, 9 to 9 business hours are spoken for and kind of like directly managed by coaches, especially like when you're an underclassman and you're stupid and you'll assume that there's no practice because somebody didn't text you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that segues perfectly. So that was my next question I had. Go through you can go drill down as much as you want, but I think this will format some questions well. Go through your typical, like you said, 6:37 to 8 p.m. Like, what does your day to day look like as far as school, practice, all that kind of stuff? So what was your first real full day there?
Yeah. So I think maybe a fair disclaimer is twofold. One, like your first real day is going to be like either at spring training or at fall camp or something like that. Like whenever you're told to arrive, you're probably not in classes. And so your kind of first couple of weeks, like for me, that was fall camp just because of the shortened season. Those first couple of weeks are just like all football all the time, where you show up at 6, you're lifting, you have meetings, you have practice, you have another workout, whether that's just like stretching or recovery or whatever. You've got all of the different kind of contrast therapy, injury rehab, all that kind of stuff is programmed into your day. All of your meals are at specific times. You are with your teammates pretty much from that kind of like 6 a.m. until like dinner. And then you've got individual position meetings in the evening. It's just like your whole time is spoken for, right? Like this, it's similar in the NFL in fall camp. That's why all of those guys are at hotels. It's just like when there's not any other distractions, every second's accounted for. It's not really like realistic once the season starts. And so that's the place where you see programs doing things a lot differently. Tech was a morning practice team when I was there because I was part of Coach Collins' philosophy. Tech practices in the afternoon now under Brent Key. So like things are different sometimes. And so for me, there was usually, if there was a lift in the morning, it would happen before practice. if there were meetings in the morning, you would usually like, this is maybe another thing that is not like intuitive because it's not like this in high school. Practice time is really, really, really tightly scripted at the college and pro levels, especially in high levels of it, where you walk in the morning and you have a meeting before practice to kind of prep for the day. But that prep for the day, a lot of times, is being handed a schedule that says like, not only these are the exact times, weirdly specific times sometimes, right? Where it's like, 6:30 practice starts, 6:32 first whistle blow, 6:34 warm ups done, kind of thing, right? Like it's scheduled down to the minute, but also the individual plays you're probably running are scripted exactly that day. So you walk in, and that is the time before practice, a lot of times, where you will learn those plays, kind of be given heads up about things that might be different this week than last week, that kind of thing. And then obviously, like for us, we would have practice. You kind of go through all that kind of stuff. And then that evening, you kind of are watching footage of that practice, seeing what went well, what didn't go well. Probably do some like scout tape footage, that kind of thing. And then in between is either like more rehab, more treatment, contrast therapy, that kind of thing. And then somewhere in there, you kind of are a student and doing classes, right? And so the morning kind of practice philosophy sometimes tightens that window a lot, right? Like we weren't finishing all of that kind of stuff until usually afternoon. And so you really only kind of have like a few hours available to like schedule all of your classes in per day. And so usually you have this morning block and then like a mad dash of classes for like 4.5, 5 hours in the evening, and then back to meetings. And then you kind of study and stuff afterwards. But afternoon folks, they have more of the class schedule open to them, that kind of thing. So it depends a little bit on the campus and on the coach's philosophy. But generally speaking, there's probably about like 5 to 8 hours of your day kind of like reserved by football. It just can kind of happen at different times.
And then having to cram the rest of your day into
right.
those
Yes. And
hours.
You guys are all from the South, so you are more aware of this than maybe like the average person. But regardless of if you're a student athlete, whatever, Georgia Tech's an extremely challenging school to be a student at. Sometimes part of the reason that recruiting is a challenge for us, right? Like one of the things that I learned going in is like when they were talking to me and stuff like that, when they were like, hey, look, like a lot of the walk-ons that we offer are guys whose film we like, but it's literally impossible for us to get them into the school. And so if you can get in on your own right, and if there's, kind of like young athletes out there, right? Like I was far more motivated about my, like kind of sports than my classes, right? They just were less exciting to me, but they are actually for the kind of people who are on the fence at a different level, right? If you're like the D3 guy who like might be able to make his nudge into D2 or whatever level that is for you, a lot of times like you being able to get into the school without help is sometimes kind of the tiebreaker there.
What was your major? Because you're obviously pretty smart if you're getting in there. And how did you manage that? Like, because I know a lot of guys are like going to school to play football. And I know that if you're actually focusing on your academics, it's like you're actually being a real student athlete.
Right. Yeah. So. Very flattering question, Ryan. I appreciate it. Yeah. But, yeah. So I, in and outside of football, I have a long relationship with Georgia Tech. And I say that, my friends from Georgia Tech who may or may not listen to this podcast will know how loaded my long relationship with Georgia Tech is. I came in as an economics and international affairs major, like my freshman year. The first 3 years here at Georgia Tech, I was doing that bachelor's degree. I finished that. And then my last 2 years with Georgia Tech, I was doing my master's in computer science and computing systems. And so most people on campus obviously are generally STEM or engineering majors, and economics is kind of like a weird in between that and like the few communications or business or humanities folks that are there. So I think like my graduating major, I think my year out of like, 3,000 or 4,000 graduates, there were like 6 of us from the major that graduated that year. Didn't know all of them, which I think football had something to do with, to be honest. But yeah, so that, to answer your question about like how you manage that kind of thing, I guess you manage it. There's a lot of kind of just random gaps in my memory around school that year. Like it was kind of obviously like blessed enough to be academically successful that semester. And it didn't like football didn't really impact my grades in any meaningful way. But it certainly impacted my stress levels and feeling of having everything under control, right? Like every day is total chaos when school is like really, really hard and you're taking classes that are just genuinely like a lot more advanced than other colleges will ask of you. Like at Georgia Tech, Calculus 1, Calculus 2, Physics 1, and linear algebra are all considered gen eds. So like everybody, if you're a history major, you're taking them. If you're, sociology, you're taking them. And so a lot of times that freshman year is kind of like really stressful for, people who aren't playing a sport at all. And so really, I think like probably the way I managed it, if I could remember it all, was like not sleeping a lot, studying at random times when I could, all those kind of things, but you kind of like, there is an element of like, you are getting a privilege to do football at this high of a level. And part of the sacrifice is your time and your just kind of like capacity to get everything done.
Do they have like tutors and stuff like help y'all out a lot with school? Or are you
Yeah, they do. We're not usually the best students when it comes to tutors. Like I think I had a lot of friends who were tutors for student athletes, and I don't know if we were always like the best patients, so to speak. There's a lot of guys that I know that came through the program that were just like genuinely like really, really smart guys and are really successful in their STEM fields. I was talking to a teammate of mine at the spring game the other day. Willard Schism, if you're listening to this, I'm glad you took my advice to listen to the podcast. But like a guy like him, right? Like he played football for 5 years, was a captain his last year, now is like a highly successful civil engineer here in the Atlanta area. And he was one of those guys, maybe he took tutoring, I don't know. But like was just really just kind of genuinely successful in his own right for, being really smart. And I think that there is this kind of maybe feeling from, I guess, pop culture or just kind of like experiences with athletes in high school that football is this kind of like uniquely like dumb build of like individual. And I totally understand that perspective because we've built a sport around doing things that kind of like this, like turn your brain into soup, like, but this is like a really mentally demanding sport. And so the guys who are successful in football at Georgia Tech are almost without exception, like genuinely really intelligent guys off the field as well.
They make it seem like it's like this big like meathead sport. But like a lot of the guys are really good are like Luke Kuechly and Caleb Downs and stuff. So I feel like they're like so smart in football. It's like easy translation that like they have like a high IQ. So it's just if they want to apply it.
Right. I think most student athletes that you talk to, it's possible that they have like maybe a lower GPA than you would maybe expect from just kind of your average student. It's actually usually like not the case, but if it is, a lot of times it's just because of the time demands, right? Like there's just only so many hours in the day. And so that guy might take a B in a class that he would otherwise be capable of an A in. So there is sometimes some nuance there, right? Like part of the reason that there's a perception of that kind of like meatheadedness of the sport is because that's just kind of like the more fun attitude to approach like being on the field with. Like, nobody wants to seem like the most book smart guy on the field, right? Like you want to be the guy who's going to knock somebody's head off, right? So it's not necessarily like a thing that I'm all that invested in, like, fighting from like non-football players, right? But it is like, I think it's cool to see how smart sometimes these guys are. Just from in the real world, these are really intelligent, successful people who have overcome a lot of adversity to do what they did.
I'd always be interested to see if somebody did like a conclusive study or a more broad study on athletes and rates of like learning disabilities, things like attention deficit disorder, things like that. Because I know I was ADD as a child, and seeing kids hyperfixate on something like football, where their history class might not get them that way, but they're brilliant kids that can hyperfixate, spend all that time, learn the ins and outs of the game, and it might not show on their academic record, but in their performance, you're seeing it. I've always wondered how much of that you see in that kind of environment, but the speed of the game, and when you really start to learn it, like, and you start to try to predict plays as you're watching things like that, you realize there's a depth there that's very tough to keep up with.
It's tough to keep up with. And I would definitely, I have on the computer that I'm talking on right now, like some of my old, playbooks and stuff like that. And I think it would be, I don't open them because I think it'd be embarrassed how much I forgot, right? Like there's so much like complexity to the game, and like is like an order of magnitude of like the guys that are playing in the NFL are playing in schemes that are frighteningly more complicated than what we would play like in the ACC. But even that, I felt like I was like being asked to do brain surgery sometimes, like especially when I walked in, and I was like, no, like a play is a color and a number. That's what you need to know, right? Like that's the only information that I have to take in, and I don't have to know what anybody else on the field is doing. But now there are all these kind of levels of depth about protection concepts and things getting changed at the line of scrimmage and routes that you decide you're going to run a certain way, like in real time, right? Like all these things it's like a legitimate complexity step up, but it's it's a fun challenge to dive into for sure.
That's kind of funny. That made me think of this. I'm not trying to make fun of her, but my mom one day, I was like trying to explain something in football, and I told her that they run like design plays, and almost blew her mind. Like they even run
she just
plays.
thought football was like backyard rules.
No, everybody's running around.
Well, I think to somebody who's looking at it, that's what it looks like when you first see it. People wait, they see the ball start moving, and they all start trying to get at each other. And there's a lot more to it than that.
His mom devoted her life to studying the ins and outs of the Tampa 2 system since this comment. And so she's not been, represented properly. She's actually like the biggest ball knower on the call right now. But But Rise throwing her
But I
under
was
the
gonna
bus.
say, there's probably levels that like even her to us and then us to like you is like a huge gap that I can't even like really imagine the stuff y'all
You
are
know,
learning.
there is the kind of like I've
But
forgotten a lot about football at this point. Probably like there's just so much to take in all the time that it's kind of like speaking a language. If you really pull back from it a lot, there's things that you lose. I think that the kind of if we're talking about the ball knowledge that just kind of sticks around forever, a lot of it is the kind of execution, right? Of like a lot of times when I'm, like watching the Super Bowl or something like that, something that I'm watching in a large group of friends, a lot of times like the thing that I will notice the most of like, oh, this is the thing that's like not quite clicking is all of those kind of like, is this person actually executing poorly or is there just something else going on? That's the problem, right? Like quarterback airmails a ball like 30 yards over a guy's head. Everybody's furious at the quarterback, and you're just kind of looking at it, where you're like definitely ran the wrong route, and it's like, and everybody's mad at St. Fields or whoever, and it's just like, well, maybe you shouldn't be because like there's just other things like those are the kind of things that stick around where it's just that kind of like intuitive like this was executed well, this wasn't, um, rather than like I wouldn't be able to like draw up probably a single play from when I was playing just like sitting down here right now. Like those kind of like technical things don't last as long as the intuitive stuff.
well, I feel like you're almost going to school to get like two separate degrees. Like I feel like you're going to go in and you're learning a playbook and formations and schemes, and you're getting into it with your player positions, your coaching staffs, all that different stuff, and you're also trying to get a technical degree at a technical institution at the same time. So how do you go and juggle that separation to be like, oh, I have a final exam this week, but also like we're playing Georgia and I have to like go and study all these things
Right.
and like separate the two. Like I've always wondered like how do you make that distinction?
I mean, my thing, right? Like, as a freshman walk on, I'm like, man, we're playing Notre Dame this week, but I'm not playing Notre Dame this week. So, like, I can ignore the playbook this week, just kind of lock in for my, computer science final, whatever. It's like, all right, this week I do not know any of the blocking schemes, but I do know how to program like an infinite loop, I guess. I don't know. So I think like the question of the guys who really are dealing with the pressure of going out there and performing on Sundays as opposed to right like the role of really most young players, right? Even a lot of the young scholarship players is to be that infrastructure of support around the people who are kind of carrying the weight on Saturdays, right? So like the way that we would juggle those things is a little bit different because the actual expectation of like this has to be perfect on Saturday isn't necessarily on us. So for me, you kind of did just triage, right? Like my coaches will not be, watching this podcast, so I don't have to like pretend like I watched more film than I did. It's just like, oh, well, like school's busy. We just aren't watching film today kind of thing. Right. But that trade-off might happen in a different direction for somebody who's got a lot more Saturday responsibility than, the freshman tight end or gray shirt or whatever that doesn't have that kind of weight on their shoulders.
Now, with the landscape of college football now, with NIL and transfers, you're seeing a lot of younger freshmen coming in, stepping into roles where they are Saturday guys, either at the D2 level or, D5 level or group of five level. Do you think on an individual level, do you think that's a better experience for some of those younger guys as a whole? Did you like more of your being able to sit a bit more and ease into the system?
Yeah, you're touching on something interesting there, right? Like there are a couple things that made my like really brief exposure to, I guess now Power Four football really unique. One of which was the fact that I showed up during COVID, right? And so just like everything was different. That was also the last year before NIL was a thing, right? Like,
yeah.
So it was something that we kind of intuitively knew was probably happening eventually, but didn't know when. So there is a degree to which my experience in college football is kind of like blissfully ignorant of the fact that like other like I could have been making a little bit of money in different contexts, right? And like NIL for walk-ons today is rare. It's not impossible. Like if you're playing football for a living as a college student, like it changes the calculus, right? Like you might decide to transfer to a smaller D1 school or a D2 school where you might make like, like a few $1,000s a year as opposed to being a walk-on somewhere and paying to go to school there. That may be a better experience for some people. It may be a worse experience, right? Like for me, I think that it probably wouldn't have moved the needle for me because like the kind of calls of what I knew I was supposed to be doing outside of football were kind of strong enough that it was like I knew I was going to stay at Georgia Tech and that I, wasn't going to keep playing football. But I don't know if like necessarily the opportunity to transfer to like a smaller school and maybe make like a little bit more money would have been like super compelling to me in that situation. So for some people, it is this like really like wonderful opportunity to provide for their families and build like a stable financial foundation for themselves, in addition to paying for this great education. And transfer portal is like a genuinely important ingredient of that, right? Like I'm very pro NIL and transfer portal, right? Like I know that there's a lot of chaos that's introduced into the system from them. And obviously like there's some degree that like obviously needs to be brought under control. There's probably some ways that like I would be probably more pro the kind of like radical, like, oh, let's have a college football players union conversation than just like somebody who's sitting on their couch, like not thinking about it. Right. Like,
yeah.
So from my perspective, like it kind of depends on what you actually wanted out of your college football experience. If the only thing you wanted out of your college football experience is to go play at the school your dad went to school at, to be there for 4 years and tough it out no matter what, right? Like it doesn't affect your experience. And also like the lack of continuity between teammates might make your experience worse. If football is like aspirational for you, it's a great vehicle to kind of fuel that aspiration.
So I know you mentioned smaller schools. And I'd be kind of the same way as you. If I was a big Georgia Tech fan, I would consider just going there for school anyway. So I know you probably didn't consider them. But did you go, like, tour any smaller schools? Because I've been to Georgia Tech, and it's, like, pretty amazing. But I was wondering how they compared.
I mean, I'm very, I guess, as a, alum and somebody who understands kind of, like, unique culture at Georgia Tech at this point, I'm, like, way more Georgia Tech pilled than I would have been going into the school. Like, a lot of the reason why I ended up at this school and not others was because some of my D3 recruiting visits, I found out that you don't get scholarships from those schools. And so I was kind of out on the D3 concept quicker than I thought I would be. I did tour some smaller D1 schools for, kind of like the summer recruiting process, right? Like there's a degree to which, by the way, I don't know if you ever experienced this with baseball at all, Chandler, but like I will never forget, like there was a smaller Division I school here in the South that I toured. Thought I had like an okay camp, not like an amazing one, but like a reasonable enough one. I went up to go introduce myself to the head coach afterwards. And he said the sentence that I think more than anything is just like the easiest way to tell somebody that it's like, there's like a 0% chance that you're being offered at the school, is where he shakes my hand, he looks me in the eyes and he says, your coach tells me that you have great grades. And I was like, I'm just going to go. I'm going to leave. My services are no longer required here. I'll go somewhere else. So there is like, yes, I did tour smaller schools at the D3 level, at the kind of Patriot League level, at the D1 level, like those kind of things. My decision, I was in the position where I knew I didn't want to play football for free unless I was at like an aspirational school. I felt like I was capable of playing in the Power Five. I really wanted to prove that to myself. But if you're walking on at the Power Five, you kind of have to make the decision in like a purely academic sense. And so when I visited Georgia Tech, like you said, Ryan, I thought it was an amazing campus. I was really kind of attracted to the idea of being in Atlanta. And for anybody who's listening who isn't familiar with Georgia Tech at all, it's in like the heart of Atlanta. Like it's really one of the country's kind of purest like urban metro campuses by location. That was really appealing to me. The professors that I talked to were just like really cool and really like interested in my long-term kind of development. And so I knew that like if football was going to be an academic decision, like Georgia Tech was really the only place I wanted to play. And so then when I made the decision to go to school there, and the football thing kind of happened after that, it was like the perfect storm for me.
I can imagine going from our area here in Niceville up to the heart of Atlanta didn't help that, I would say, day-to-day change that you go through when you're going from just being an 18-year-old high school student to an 18-year-old college student, being pretty crazy.
Yeah, the streets being empty because of a global pandemic actually made the transition a lot easier. In some ways, coming back to campus the next year was even more jarring because Atlanta was like back to normal, and that was really overwhelming. But yeah, I remember I was sitting in the car outside the student athlete dorms with my dad when I first got there, and he made this comment to me where he's like, eventually Atlanta will probably feel like your place, like your city, where it'll be like the thing that feels most familiar to me. And it's kind of one of those like, dad moments where you're like, this guy, like he is just like, well, just keep saying stuff to make me feel better that, nobody believes it's true. But yeah, I mean, I finished school here, and it was kind of one of those things where it's like, there's not really any other city that I want to be in. And so like, I've been here for, 3 or 4 years after finishing my undergrad, a year after kind of wrapping up at Georgia Tech as a whole. Yeah, it was a big part of the adjustment, but it's probably the part of my whole football experience that stuck the most, which was just like a really deep and significant love for like the city of Atlanta. And so again, that kind of feeds into your earlier question of like somebody like me, if the transfer portal was a bigger opportunity, it was like, no, I wanted to be in Atlanta. I loved it here. I loved the school. I loved the challenge that it was asking of me academically, because it also like, freshman year is kind of the year at Georgia Tech where it's like kind of the most shell shocking, but it's not anywhere close to the most difficult academic year, right? Like Georgia Tech got a lot harder for me. And it also, like just kind of that part of my football experience prepared me for that. It just made the whole thing stick.
Being a student athlete, you get access to a lot of different cool stuff, I'm sure, like especially as a football player at a school like Georgia Tech. So what were some behind the scenes, behind the curtain looks of like cool things that you had access to, or facilities or things in facilities? Like I'm sure you had chefs always whipping up some great food. Like what was your key behind the scenes stuff that you love to take advantage of?
I mean, there's a lot of ways you could answer this question, right? Like there's certain things about like there's certain things about wearing a matching set on campus with every school kind of has like the piece of student athlete gear that's like the thing that designates who's you're one of them. At Georgia Tech it's at Georgia Tech it's the backpack that they issue. That's the thing that it's like you're only getting those like a couple different ways. And if you got them the way that wasn't being the student athlete, it's usually obvious. And so there are some just kind of social perks as you'd expect, right? To like walking around with the backpack on, so to speak, right? Like, we talk about those, they're real, they happen, right? Like, people think you're more important to the team than you are. And they're like, oh, it's, so exciting that you play football. And you're like, well, I practice football, like, I don't know what else to tell you. But yeah, I mean, like in terms of the actual like lifestyle benefits, there is a way that walk-ons like benefit from that a lot. During the COVID year, there were some ways where that was adjusted just because of like safety policies and stuff like that. So I guess like I won't speak to the parts of my experience that I know were unique to that year, because they were also part of the kind of like things that were maybe less desirable or more frustrating about that year, but also the ones that just like would never have repeated themselves in a different situation, right? Like walk-ons had a separate locker room that year because of social distancing rules, which was, like I think you can imagine from like a team unity and kind of like togetherness perspective, that being like a frustrating thing. But it was also just like necessary, and it's not something that you can hold against your coaching staff, right? Like the thing Chandler's really after is that he knew me before football, and he knew me when I showed up just like looking like a completely different human from a nutrition perspective 3 months later back over Christmas.
This guy was a unit when he came back home for Christmas. I was like, dude, this man has been eating, he's been lifting, he's good to go.
Yeah, so I probably finished high school at like as like a 6'1", 6'2" kind of person, right? And like in high school, you're like, yeah, that's big. Like I'm feeling myself. Like I'm like, these colleges want me to play football for them. Like I'm probably like a useful size. I got on campus. I do all of kind of like my onboarding, physical and stuff like that. And I sit down in the tight end room, and my tight end coach, probably compassionately in his way, he was like, yeah, so like we're gonna fix this, but you're what we'd consider like severely undersized at this position. And I was like, well, what does that mean? He's like, well, you're too short and you're too light. We can fix one of those things. And so we're going to get your weight up. And I was like, well, what does that mean? He was like, I need you over 255 pounds by the end of the season. And I was like, coach, I got here because I could divide. That's so much weight a week. I don't even know how to do that. And so I probably like the kind of challenge to do that when you're working out that much and, you're practicing all the time and you don't have a car because you're freshmen, so you're walking everywhere, right? Like, for me, that was probably like a 6,000 to 8,000 calorie a day kind of was the intake. Like this is what you need to be on the trajectory to gain the weight that you need. If that seems like a lot to you, you should just be relieved. For my sake, I was not an offensive lineman who had bigger calorie deficit demands and like larger jumps that they had to make, right? Like a lot of those offensive linemen are coming in at the same size as me, depending on where they play. And their ask isn't 255, 260. It's like, 300, 320, 350. And it just has to happen as fast as possible. Like not just for the like experience or the learning opportunity, but the just kind of like safety of like these guys. A senior defensive end is like running at you at practice is like the most terrifying thing an 18-year-old can see. And you just really wish you were 30 pounds heavier so that you could survive that interaction, right? So like there's a basic just like injury prevention, especially at high levels of college football, that it's like if you are too small for your position, you are putting yourself at risk, right? Like there's a reason that when like, Darren Sproles gets hit by like, Vita Vea or something like that on a jet sweep, like everybody watching is going to like kind of cringe, because it's just like, it's just not good. Right. And so Generally speaking, yes. Like at most large football programs, there is a separate dining hall with professional chefs that are just kind of available when you need them. They're pretty nice, like I'm not gonna lie. It's probably different than the normal college experience. A lot of like different things that accommodate like different types of players, like people who need higher calorie situations, people who are maybe trying to lose weight for different reasons. Fresher ingredients, a lot more options, sometimes nicer amenities. There's a degree to which that like this seems kind of caste system-y to the outside viewer, but the NCAA does have like rules about this. So like that student athlete dorm by rule has to be available to all students on campus. The way that they end up being segmented in most situations is like two ways. One is probably inertia, where it's like, I don't think you really want to be in there, even if the food is nicer, just for the like the awkwardness of it. And a lot of times during prime meal times, if it's like a team meal, the dining hall is going to be closed and other people can't get into it, whatever, those kind of things. But also just the kind of like the other way is like sometimes the dining hall is like more expensive for non-athletes than regular students. Like there's different ways that kind of thing happens, but it's not actually usually like restricted. If you go to a Power 5 school, by the way, I would not and you're not an athlete, like this is not an endorsement of just like go explore the student athlete dining halls. I only played at one school. I don't know what'll happen. I don't suggest that being the place where you go make friends your freshman year.
Hey guys, how's it going? You guys play football?
Right, like it's not what I'm saying. You should not do that. But yeah, and so that's part of the way that they help support these guys gain weight. Sometimes there's nutritionists that are coming up with like much more strict diet plans than I had, right? Like I was able to eat enough without the supervision to gain weight that they were happy with, but like sometimes they'll help with like special stuff, the 10,000 calorie milkshakes or whatever it is that'll help you gain weight. And then obviously like the other thing, right? Like these are big schools that have a lot of sponsors. Like every morning you're probably walking into some kind of like sponsored thing that is providing food for you, right? Like obviously Chick-fil-A is an Atlanta company. At Georgia Tech, you're probably getting Chick-fil-A catered that morning when you walk in if you're doing like a morning practice. That was definitely true for us that year that I was playing. The story that I usually tell people, another Atlanta institution, Mellow Mushroom Pizza, if you're familiar, the year that I played, we would have like a particular pregame meeting on Thursday nights of most weeks. As you kind of walk out of that meeting, each person is handed a large Mellow Mushroom Pizza and a 20-piece wing order. And, like for a guy who's under like pressure to gain weight, I was usually going home, and if you're not sure, like eyeballing what 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day is, my last meal of the day, I'm going home with those 2 pieces of food, just deleting them all in like 15 or 20 minutes, and then probably putting a dish ornaments in the oven afterwards and eating that whole thing afterwards as well. Like this was the stuff that you're doing to not like walk in the next morning and having like lost 4 pounds. Like it really was like. Like if it was edible and it was within like arm's reach of me, it had to be eaten, or I wasn't gonna.
You can just for the casual Jersey Mike's connoisseur that I am, and I'm sure a lot of people are, a giant club sub Jersey Mike's with everything on it is like 2,000 calories. You'd have to eat 4 of those a day to be at 8,000.
Yeah.
That's an incredible amount of food, and that's like a cheap kind of way to do it. Like. You're eating cleaner food than that usually to get your 8,000. That's just a lot of bread that way.
Like I just sold my 2 pizzas a night story. Like at some point you just kind of like you're like, is there calories in it? Yeah, give it to me.
Is it anything that's not just like diet or water or anything?
Yeah, I mean, when I first got there, I was really worried about like, you're kind of like you're told you have to put on 30 pounds, and you're like, well, I don't want to like,
get fat.
Like I don't want to feel less athletic leaving here than when I walked in, and so you're like, I'm gonna do it all like, like protein, Instagram, whatever. And I just couldn't keep it. I just couldn't do it. It was like not physically possible for me to eat enough like lean protein to hit those kind of markers. The guys who are making millions of dollars find a way, they're not getting their calories in the same way I was. But for me, it was just too tough to just try to, protein max my way and just,
Did you have a go-to meal that you always got? Like look at the chef, make eye contact, and I know you're coming, like this is my meal.
Yeah. Most of my days, especially when I was in the process of gaining weight, every meal included at least a like kind of your kind of dining hall burger style plate. You're kind of walking over with like the collection of plates, right? So you've got like a huge pasta plate, you've got like the taco plate, you've got the burger plate, you've got the sandwich thing. You're drinking full sugar drinks because you need the liquid calories just to get there, kind of thing. And you might also have like some kind of accountability of that, of like a coach that needs to see your MyFitnessPal at the end of the day or whatever, right? Like, so there is some degree where you're like, I got to get that number at the top of the app high enough that I don't get in trouble tomorrow. kind of thing. So it really was just kind of like my go-to was like every station you're grabbing something off of it and you just,
Well, just the one of each
kind of thing. Yeah, it's like, hey, give me one of everything.
I think it's for somebody that might be outside of that, haven't really spent a lot of time in weight rooms or in sports that are demanding like that.
Yeah.
When you're talking that calories, it isn't just to put on the weight. It's to be able just to recover day to day.
Yep.
We three
100%.
spend tons of time in the gym. And if I dip too low trying to lose weight, I feel terrible all week.
100%.
And that's just a small deficit.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I'm a little bit disappointed that our listeners can't specifically watch Ryan in the gym and just his like anatomically impossible amounts of weight that he's lifting. But like if that guy's running a deficit, it's just like I'm just he's still probably bench pressing like 9,000 pounds or whatever, right? But like he probably feels terrible doing it, right? Yeah, like the recovery piece is huge.
I'd worry for his life if he goes in too deep of a deficit.
I honestly,
that's when
say
the thumb comes off the bar and it starts becoming a suicide grip more.
Yeah. I say this without any note of flattery. I have been in weight rooms with guys who are Pro Bowlers now, with guys who are in the NFL now. I've never been like as shocked by just like the sheer lifting prowess of anybody in my life as when I first lifted with Ryan. Like it was like genuinely like kind of like a little bit like unsettling. I was like, how am I seeing this right now? Like this is the craziest strength to weight ratio that I've ever seen in my life.
Because you looked at like you were there with like Jahmyr Gibbs and everybody.
Yeah, Jahmyr is about as shocking of a. I mean, like our first lift of fall camp, he was in like the freshman development group, kind of with us that morning, lifting with those guys, and he was like a small guy. He's not like a huge dude. And I remember like lifting like as much as I possibly could. We were doing like squats that day. I look over and Jahmyr's doing like he's at like $170, like repping out like double-digit reps at like. Like 420 plus on squats. And I'm just like, everybody's like sitting there staring at him. And then like, the next morning he's like starting basically. Right. So it's just like, there is a degree, right? Like everybody who gets to the Power Five has some degree of just like competency at football, but we're not all like, whatever the 1% is, there's some of us who are in like a special 1% of that 1%. And guys like Jahmyr were totally like that. Like genuinely, like some of the most like, just like shocking athleticism I've really ever seen,
Well, being in like those situations skewed your perspective on like working out and stuff. Like if you just go to like a normal commercial gym, it just
honestly, there's a lot more like mass monsters in a commercial gym than there are in like a football locker room. Like everything we're doing is like purposeful. So like a lot of these guys aren't necessarily like going in there to lift as much as they possibly can. It's like we've got a task and we need to be good at that thing, and we work out to that effect, right? Like a lot of the weight room stuff that happens, like the average Harvard musclehead at a gym is like, no, that's just cardio. You're not stimulating meaningful hypertrophy with that lift. And it's like, yeah, we know, like it's not the idea. Like, and so it has, I don't know if it's skewed my perspective because there's just so many people out there who are just like so strong, and like that was true before I was playing football in college. It's been true after. You got a lot of ex-athletes in the gym as well, like a lot more ex-athletes that are like a lot more successful at their former sport than I was, right? Like, so there is in some way like the kind of the shock and awe hasn't necessarily carried over, but a lot of that is to do with the environment. You're kind of like, oh, I'm in like this like kind of college football hallowed ground, so to speak, right? Like when I'm at LA Fitness and I see a guy like, pushing weight that should not be possible, I'm more just like, oh, all that time in the hallowed college football ground, I'm still getting mixed by this like 48-year-old, construction worker who's repping like 500 pounds
and chest and all kinds of stuff. So you're
No, now I would, while we're talking about the weight room and that experience, did you find anything like very different from being a high school lifter athlete to the weight room in college? Did that change up the protocol?
Especially for somebody who's on the practice squad, right? And who is kind of like most of their competition happens kind of in the day to day as opposed to like on Saturdays. Being in that weight room is like the most fun part of being like an underclassman, of being, like somebody who's not necessarily on the travel roster or whatever. Like that is the kind of stuff that, especially for me, that was the competition that I was kind of living and breathing for. That was the place where you're seeing meaningful progress day to day. Like there's some ways where like the weight room is kind of an accessory to what you do when you're like the best player on your high school team, where it's like, I don't even really need to like push myself that hard here because it's kind of like, I can't be sore for Friday night, whatever. In that position, most of the kind of signals that you're growing as a football player happen in the weight room before they happen on the field. At least that was true for me, right? Like, cause that was where I was seeing like the dividends of, eating like B burgers a day or whatever it was, right? Like that's where I was seeing that progress first. And so then as you're making that, when that starts to catch up and you realize you're like, oh wow, I'm like a lot better at football than I was, 3 months ago or whatever, right? Like there's more of a relationship between those two things than there is in high school, right? Because like a lot of the guys that are good in high school are horrible in the gym, or a lot of the guys who are great in the gym in high school are horrible. But like I felt like my like relationship to the weight room and like the culture that we had there was like directly connected to me feeling like I was growing as a player.
So did they have, like, I know you talked about weight goals and obviously you can't change height goals, but did they have numerical goals set up for position groups across the board as far as like in the gym goes, or on-field attributes? Like, do they have things that they want players to hit throughout the year to get those starting or meaningful roles, like in depth pieces?
We didn't really. I'm sure a lot of programs do. We had a couple things that we would do that were kind of like traditions. I was under like somebody who's been a really successful strength and conditioning coach in college football, and somebody who I have a lot of like high regard for, but like was like known for being unconventional. So there may be some ways that like my experience in that like progress tracking portion is like unusual. But for us, there were just kind of a few like trial by fire like traditions that we would do. We would do kind of like every once in a while we would do kind of like combine style like 225 tests on like bench press to like you kind of just intuitively know if you're progressing or not in that scenario, like where you're like, oh, my combine test was better at the beginning of the season than it was at the end. I must have gotten stronger, kind of thing. Other than that, it's kind of just like the coaches are helping you make sure that you're pushing yourself hard enough, right? Like they might be telling you to add weight or take weight off. They might be changing things in real time. But for us, there wasn't like a huge like, hey, you've got to be doing 80% of your max for like this, whatever, right? Like it wasn't that kind of programming. It was like, these are the lifts we need to get done. And it's kind of on us to make sure that we're pushing ourselves. And if it doesn't seem like we are, they'll kind of, make sure that the workout is productive.
Yeah, I feel like there's people that quickly can identify if you have not hit the, we'll say, exhaustion threshold that they expect out of you.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing that is probably worth saying, and I think this is maybe when you think about, there's a lot of lessons in football or sports in general that don't really carry over into real life. I know like every single one of us that played sports in high school or middle school or whatever, were probably told that like on time is being like 15 to 30 minutes early to everything. Like that's on time. Like that lesson, they lied to me. They told me that would carry over into my real life. They were not telling the truth. Maybe some of it's unique to living to Atlanta. Nobody's on time to anything here in the Microsoft Teamsification of society, right? Like you actually are, like, you can't show up that early to things anymore, right? Like some of those lessons don't carry over. One of the kind of ones that like, really did though, is that like commitment to the kind of self-accountability piece of it. Like you said, right, there's people who can quickly identify if you're not pushing yourself hard enough in the gym, but also like in the corporate world, in life, and certainly in college football, there's a degree to which if you're not pushing yourself hard enough, people might just like not stop you, right? Like so much of it is you're accountable to like keep up with the people around you, or you'll just get left behind, right? And like sometimes that is like, losing a scholarship, getting cut, not being invited back as a walk-on the previous year. Like that's the kind of time when the consequence might catch up to you. But a lot of times it's pretty easy to just be like way worse on that roster than everybody else until they decide that you're not worth keeping around, and so like that self-accountability matters a ton in college football in a way that it is going to be kind of like imposed upon you in high school.
So what is your, like, say mid-season game week, like what does that practice scheme look like throughout the week? Like how do you go like starting Monday all the way up until night before game time? Like what does your week structure look like holistically, like as you go through
I
it?
mean, for us, the general like broad strokes of every practice kind of look the same in terms of like you have individual portions where position groups are working on like position specific things with just their coaches. Then you have team periods and you have special teams periods and all that kind of stuff. The intensity of those practices just kind of tapers off naturally as you get closer to game day. They become less physical. They become shorter. You might cut certain periods at different times, but like generally speaking, it kind of like most college football practices probably follow a formula of you get there, you warm up, you have special teams, you have individual stuff, you have team stuff. You might have some sort of competitive aspect mixed in there somewhere of like guys just like competing with each other over the course of the day. and then you're kind of done, right? Like these practices are really tight and efficient because there's NCAA rules about how long you can practice for. There's rules about, how many times you can practice in a day, like how much time coaches can spend with players. And so like some of the kind of like, college football being a full-time job thing is actually a lot of the like time spent getting between those kind of things, right? It's like, yeah, you've got a 6:30 a.m. lift, but you're there at 6. And so like you've got this whole kind of like process of getting there. The actual lift itself might be like when somebody looks at it, you're like, I don't understand how that takes up your whole day. But a lot of it is the kind of lifestyle around college football more than the thing itself, right? Like a Friday practice before a game, if it happens at all, it's going to be like, 30 minutes, 35 minutes. Guys are going to walk through stuff really quickly, go over a couple essential things, and then get out of there, right? Like if you're not on like the kind of like first couple rungs of the depth chart, that might not even be a practice you participate in. You might just be on the sidelines or kind of like in a lift that's separate from what those guys are doing. Like if it's an away game, that calculus changes a lot because you've got all these Mac trucks full of weight equipment, medical equipment, film equipment. They got to get to wherever you're going. And that's even more true in the Power 4 era, right? Like if Georgia Tech goes and plays Cal now, the whole infrastructure around college football has to change because those trucks got to get to Cal. And all of the things that team's going to require need to be there on Friday whenever they get there. And so the timeline kind of condenses in some, kind of non-intuitive ways, depending on, what's going on that week.
So as an athlete, does that kind of leave you in a week-to-week adjustment where it's like you can have a consistent schedule, but there's so many changes that will come up that you're kind of just waiting for it?
Yeah, I think that there's just a general way where college for everybody, but like definitely college sports just kind of require a certain degree of flexibility and like willingness to like not have a consistent routine that can be really helpful. The thing that actually at that point makes these guys successful is the fact that in the face of all of these like inconsistent routines, they have really consistent discipline. If their day looks different every week, their process looks the same. Like they still find a way to make sure all of the essential things are happening, right? Whether that's film or recovery or nutrition or whatever, right? Like that's the kind of things that it's like, if the week looks different, you got to adjust. You got to make sure those essential things still happen.
I'm going to ask a very educational question here about academics that nobody cares about on this college football podcast. But I've always wondered because we mentioned away games and stuff like that. Like now with the playoff structure, you have December games that go into finals weeks. You have games that bleed into January. So if you have to travel to a game on, say, a Wednesday, how hard is it or coordinate with teachers and faculty to be able to get those exams in early or homework early? Like what do you have to do to like navigate that process? Because I know like nobody thinks about that as a fan. Like, oh, these guys don't have finals or anything else going on. Like they just
I think there's the perception that like college football players are just kind of exempt from inconvenient academic things. Making time for it, the pushing things back a couple of days, the maybe turning things in early. The school makes sure that your professors will accommodate those things. But the work still has to get done somehow, right? Like a lot of these guys are doing homework on planes or in hotel rooms when they have spare time. They're turning presentations in on the road. I know that it's pretty common in, student athlete spaces. If you're in like a group project with a student athlete, you sometimes have to work to accommodate those kind of things where it's like, hey, this is our presentation and this is, John Smith's component of the presentation from a hotel in Syracuse, New York, right? Like those kind of things, they change a lot. And so I guess the part of your question of like, what does that process look like? The school just helps make it happen. They don't make the grades disappear. They don't make the assignments disappear. So there's a degree of like, we'll work out the logistics for you so that you can kind of be in two places at one time, but the work's got to get done when it's got to get done. So sometimes that may mean like, hey, like I can still, and I'm speculating here, right? Like I'm not drawing on specific examples, right? But like you might have to make a decision that's like, hey, I can still, get a B in this class with like a really terrible grade on the final. I'm just going to airmail the final from my hotel room, do terrible on it, and, live to fight another day, right? Like those are the kind of decisions that you ask yourself. And like, if you're at a really, difficult academic school, you might be making those calculations like independent of sports, because I certainly like was still making those calculations once I quit football, right? Like there's some ways where like the setting is different for the athlete, but the actual challenges kind of remain the same. It's like there's not enough hours in the day. We got to make it happen somehow.
Yeah. So the school helps the student athletes with flexibility, but not an excuse to get out of work.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And I think that like in particular, one of the things that is probably a big misconception is like the standard of like absenteeism in like the day to day, like especially at these big schools, like a head coach is probably showing up to various different classes he knows players are in almost every single class day to make sure that they're not skipping. There's a lot of accountability around these guys to handle the process, right? My sister went to Penn State. James Franklin showing up to those classes was a pretty normal event to like see him check in, make sure the players were there. If they weren't, what kind of punishment happens depends on the coach and their philosophy and stuff like that. At Georgia Tech, it was a lot of times what we refer to as study hall, which is basically just like you're just in a room with the coaches and you're studying because they're just staring at you and it's like too intimidating to do anything but be productive. You may not be allowed to be on your phone or something in that room or whatever, right? Like some coaches may do like, the kind of physical punishment of running or whatever, like I don't know what all college football coaches do, but like, if you're just a regular student, there's no consequence for just skipping in class one day. But like for a student athlete, there might be, beyond just like, a couple percentage points off on like 10% of your syllabus.
Was there any weird other like nuancy things in the day to day that they would like get in trouble for? That, like don't seem that big a deal.
One of the ones that was unique to COVID was like where you went. I like if you saw pictures from me in that era, I had like extremely long hair. Because it was just kind of like the expectation was that we would do what was necessary. There was a perfectly reasonable expectation, even though it was like a difficult one to uphold, that like you do whatever it takes to make sure that the whole team is healthy and that everybody's available if need be. And we don't have a situation where we have to cancel a game because too many people have COVID, right? Like in our situation, that did happen to us at one point in the season. I think it was a game against Pitt that we had to cancel because between the two teams, there weren't enough players to like field rosters that would have been safe because there was like a huge COVID outbreak in Pittsburgh and like, one in our group and stuff like that, right? Like, so there are some of those nuances that it's like, you're not on a team as like a normal college like student, but your life is about like protecting the team, right? Like the coaches will go to clubs that they know players shouldn't be at and make sure they're there. And right. And there's plenty of jokes you can make about that, right? Like about like, what kind of work's really happening when they show up there, right? Like but coaches will make sure that players' lifestyle is in line with something that protects the team, and so there's a degree of that, but like so much of that, like what you're asking, Ryan, kind of comes down to a coach's individual culture and like the things that they think are important, right? Like, if a coach thinks it's really important that players sit in the front 3 rows of a class, that might be like an expectation on them, right? Like big one, the nuance was like coaches wanted us to be at least 30 minutes early to everything. And so that was the nuance. And that kind of extended, like we were all in online classes, but like if you had an in-person class, like the expectation probably would have been, and probably not enforced, but like, you got to be early to those classes. And so there is just kind of a standard on how you just operate your life in the day to day that not all of it can be enforced. And, obviously like a lot of it's, not being enforced. I wouldn't be a true Georgia Tech alum if I didn't just take an opportunity to throw a shot at the team from Athens. Just like clearly whatever standard of living is being enforced in Georgia, it is not being enforced, right? Like we're on DUI 27 or what's something like that in the last few years, right?
It's Hellcats and alcohol.
You don't got to cut that out in post. I'll say anything negative about that school and put it on the record. Some of it depends on culture. Usually, like your standard of living is going to be different in terms of just how you carry yourself and like what you get up to.
The 30 minutes early thing, like ever throw you off that like you had lifts and then you couldn't leave because you had to be 30 minutes early? So you had to like stay at the facility.
Yeah. I mean, once you're there, you just don't leave until the last thing is done, like for the sake of like being on time to things. And it's really kind of like at that point, it's like if everything's happening consecutive, you're just there early, right? Like if practice started at 7, I was usually there like 6:15 or whatever. And from that perspective, like you're not going to be, if the lift and practice are 5 minutes apart, they're not going to be like all over. But the lift and practice would usually probably be 30 minutes apart. But you kind of read in between the lines. You're like, okay, that just means I head there right after practice. The main thing that tripped me up was I was not informed of the 30 minutes early rule until it was too late. I had a bit of a like family emergency that required me to like be on the phone for like longer than I expected one day. And I stayed on because I was like, I'll just be right on time to practice today. And I know that that's like not a thing, like you can't usually do it. And like, I'm like sprinting across campus trying to get there. And I've got every coach is like calling me, like, what's going on? What are you missing? Right. I show up, immediately get kicked out of the lifts because they're like, you're not, X minutes early, whatever. And I'm like, I didn't know that was a thing. And they were like, gotta enforce a standard on people who don't know what's going on too. And so I was like, but what if, X horrible thing happened to me and I was dealing with that? And they were like, well, sounds like you need a freaking lift, and then you kind of maybe get welcomed back into the weight room, right? Like college football is not without a soul, right? But like the process is like pretty unflinching, and there's 125 guys on the roster. Like if you're not there that day to lift, somebody else is, so yeah.
So what were some of the like niche activities that you did outside of lifting or football or whatever? Like was there pickleball, pickup basketball, PlayStation in the locker room? Like what were some of the things that the guys did outside of ball or lifting?
One torn ACL during fall camp meant basketball is like a hard no for us. Like we were not allowed to play basketball. Um, a lot of like structured yoga sessions during fall camp. This was like a thing. Some of the funniest videos on my camera roll are of some of the best athletes you've ever been around, trying and failing to follow like a, royalty free yoga YouTube video to get healthy. Most of the things that we did because of COVID stuff was like the unstructured things that would happen in people's apartments, right? Like student athletes at Tech that are living on campus generally are only staying with other student athletes. And so that just kind of provides like a quote unquote safe space for you to just kind of like be with your guys in different places. And so like a lot of the kind of unstructured things would happen. Just like, so there's just kind of like those kind of things that happen. A lot of the NBA debates about like which player is better than this one that get really heated and end up taking over an hour in the locker room kind of thing. Like a lot of it is like unstructured like that, some programs, this wasn't really how Georgia Tech is, but some programs have a lot of like player life things built into the locker room. Like Tech's not a kind of like game room in the locker room, Clemson slide in the locker room type of thing, whatever, right? Like, so a lot of that kind of stuff happens informally and organically. And that's kind of one of the things that you look back on really fondly about those kind of things, are just like the random moments where you were just with your teammates in moments where you didn't have to be, right? Like there is some degree of the fact that like when your whole life is built around football, like the best moments are the ones that you aren't actually asked to be there and you're kind of there anyways, Sometimes that would happen in the form of like at the end of fall camp, there was like a unstructured team dinner or like a fan event or something like that. That would just be really fun. There was one day where there was like a really bad COVID outbreak in the ACC and we like weren't sure if the season was going to happen or not during fall camp. And so that day we just like, at the end of practice, just like our coaches were like, we're playing catch today. And so we were just out there, just like no time limit. We were in Bobby Dodd Stadium, just like with as much time as we wanted to just, enjoy each other's company and just hope that we were going to get to go play football the next day, And so a lot of that is kind of stuff that happens just kind of in the background.
So I know Georgia Tech, Adidas, right? Are they still sponsored by Adidas primarily?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So as far as gear goes, like I know Oregon, Super Epicenter, anything they want, they can have. So when you had fittings come in for helmets, visors, cleats, gloves, everything, like whenever you wanted something of that brand or sponsor, were you able to just get it or customize it however you wanted it? Like if you had a specific helmet you liked, could you get that fitted for you and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So when you show up and you get your fitting, basically any helmet that's available in like our equipment kind of quote unquote database, so to speak, you just select what you want, right? Like I was a SpeedFlex guy. That's what I wanted. That's what I had. You pick a visor that you want, you pick which kind of cleats you like the best. And like, basically anytime you need something, it's going to be delivered to you, in your locker. Like there's a lot of like kind of player life things, right? Like where some days like new clothes will just kind of show up in your locker that are maybe part of like a brand's thing. For us, every week we had different like team gear that would show up that was like unique to that week. And so like if it was, homecoming, like the homecoming shirt might look different that week, or you might just get like a bunch of clothes in your locker for like an Adidas press event or something like that, right? Like there are a lot of just kind of like random pieces of tech gear that I'll kind of always have around that just stuck with me. The probably more like shocking part is all of the stuff, like just the sheer amount of stuff that I couldn't keep when I left in terms of like like how much gear was issued to me. Like I probably like went through just in that one season, though, right? Like a 14-game season, I probably had like 6 to 8 pairs of cleats that I went through that were provided, 5 or 6 pairs of gloves, like all the different kind of things. And then they give you all these, just clothes that you can wear outside. And obviously my, the backpack, this, the status symbol, whatever thing that I, after I left the team, I hardly even ended up using. I'm not even like, I think I have it still. It's, under my bed somewhere. But yeah, I mean, gear part of it, it's not like to the extent that people would think of like the extravagance of like, oh, you're getting like $400 worth of Nike gear a week if you're a Nike school. Like that doesn't really happen, but it is a lot. It's way more than we could possibly need. It's more than anybody needs, but it's, it is like a cool privilege to just be given a lot of stuff that nobody else has. that's unique to your kind of experience and your struggle and successes at a place like Tech, and just kind of having those things as like physical reminders of the stuff that you did. But yeah, like all of the things related to how you do your job, like the pads, the helmets, everything, like all of that is exactly as you request, basically within what the brand can offer
And
you.
do you get to keep, like, this is probably a stupid question, but do you get to keep like helmets and all that kind of stuff that you had? Like, do you have your game helmet still?
Dude, I wish. It's so hard to get those kind of things. I don't have any jerseys. I had some cleats for a while, but a few years later, and this is also another thing, I don't know if it's true at all schools, but it's not something you necessarily expect, because like I said, the kind of finishing rate of college sports is lower than you think. There are actually rules in intramural sports leagues about like how long student athletes had to wait after finishing playing their sport before they could like play with other people. And so like I had to wait a year after finishing football to be allowed to like play intramural football with anybody on campus. And so, when I showed up to get to play, intramural football with like my non-sports friends, it's kind of like, well, the only cleats I have now are all these pairs of team issued cleats that I had from when I finished sports, and stolen immediately, right? It's just like, if you leave team gear lying around, it's gone. It's just, it is going to disappear instantly. And so there's some stuff that I've lost due to the kind of like
theft,
off and on Georgia Tech kleptomaniac, which isn't necessarily a problem. Like I'm not getting stuff stolen all the time, but if you leave a pair of, team issued Adidas cleats,
so I'm guessing they stand out more than the usual, like go to Dick's Sporting Goods cleats.
They just might be colors that you wouldn't necessarily get otherwise, right? They're not particularly audacious because of NCAA rules, right? Like there's only so much color that can be on a pair of cleats, and they'll have to be associated with the uniform that week, right? So like, yeah, they're usually pretty like conservative in design, but you kind of know when you see them, you're like, oh, that's different.
Yeah. And I can assume if you're at the school participating in intramural sports, what your team's dressed in, and you recognize
you're like, oh, these might as well be my size. I'm just gonna help myself, kind of thing.
There might be 4 sizes too small for me, but
right. I mean, it was kind of a weird feeling for me, like when I left the team and had my accidentally donated my cleats, whatever. It was kind of like, this is a weird thing. I was like, I don't remember. How do you buy gear for yourself? People are like, what do people even buy anymore? All this stuff is just like showing up in a box for me for the last year. Like, I don't know what's new. I used to, like, when you're buying that stuff every year in high school, you kind of know what you like and what's new and like what the best thing on the market is, and you can switch brands whenever you want. But I spent it like years like an Adidas guy, and you can only be an Adidas guy. And so then it was just like how do you even manage this process now that you're kind of like doing it for yourself again?
So how dominant were you in?
What's the best way to say this? If there are 125 football players on the D1 roster, and it's my sophomore year and I am not on the D1 roster anymore, I'm no worse than like the 126th best football player in the school, right? Like, like it's just like, there's just I also go to an engineering school, right? Like these aren't guys who like had like huge football dreams and like could have gone D1 necessarily in any other school. A lot of these are folks that like have never played football before. And like, so, and to be clear, that also includes like my own teammates, right? Like one of my main intramural memories is like another friend of mine who was a walk-on and then, left the team, was playing intramurals and stuff like that. Was my friend Tanner, who was a backup quarterback, right? And so that's like, the walk-on, that's like the third to fifth quarterback on the depth chart, right? And then as soon as that guy steps onto the field, it's like you're watching, like prime Patrick Mahomes amongst just like normal people, right? Like that guy just looks outrageously good on an intramural field. And so like playing against him was a lot of fun because it's just like, there's some degree, right, where I had a great time with my intramural team. I think it's possible my intramural quarterback, Carter, is going to watch this, and so shout out to him. He was a great intramural quarterback. We had a lot of fun. We weren't ever like a dominant team, but like I handled myself fine in that situation.
Is it just something where you see a guy who's like 6'2" show up, he's 240, and you're like, he looks like he plays?
This guy definitely.
I think it's funny. I think it's funny. I'm kind of shouting out a lot of my friends who I think will probably listen to this and or see stuff get clipped, and then I'll tag them. But I am going to make fun of one of my best friends. His name is Sam Hodges, who knows I'm recording this right now because he was texting me right before this. But I'll never forget, like, that effect that you just described, the kind of like instant recognition, is not as normal as you'd think, because Sam and I used to play intramural sports together all the time. And we were part of this Christian ministry on campus called RUF, where we would like field our own intramural teams. And I remember Sam telling me one time, he was like, I'd assume just because of your like size that you're like the slowest guy in all of our like kind of like group of people. And I was like, Sam, no, I'm not. And he was like, really? Well, like, where do you think you are? And I'm like, the fastest. And he's like, but you're, whatever. And I'm like, I think the way that I described it was like, we're going to play our first intramural game, and you will apologize to me for saying that afterwards. He kind of came up to me afterwards. He's like, I'm sorry, man. I didn't know. I don't actually care. I'm just, like these, but it is kind of like, there's a reality of like, there were guys that like just were kind of like normal looking dudes to me, even on an intramural field, that like, just like randomly on one play, I'd get absolutely mixed by, right? Like great athletes come all over the place. And so that cuts both ways. That's really all that there is to say. Like, there's no sense in pretending like I wasn't a good intramural football player, because I was a perfectly fine regular football player. But there's also just like, it's totally reasonable for people to just like not assume that coming into it. One, because it's, flag, it's a different game. But also just because like the people who are the best athletes are a lot of times like surprising, and so like there's totally, like,
I mean,
totally happy for people to have like this perception that I'm not like the world's greatest intramural player or anything like that, because I'm not, but like you can handle yourself okay in that situation.
It is funny though, looking at like the combine. I mean, you get these like defensive tackles, offensive guards. I mean, some of them are running like sub fives, if not a little bit over, like a 5'1", 5'2", 40. And like, you would think like your buddy, 300-pound guy, there's no way he can move like that. But again, we're talking about the top 1% of athletes that are playing their sport. And
totally.
They have the world-class training facilities. They have world-class nutritionists. They have the speed and agility guys. They have everything they need to be able to perfectly tune their body to what is needed on the field. And like, even you have these big, we always call them clunky tight ends, because it looks like they just, get hit and then fall down. They don't ever like break tackles or shimmy out of things. But just like you said, like, you're still flying down the field because you're getting compared to these receivers that are running like 4.3s. So all these people are still moving.
Yeah. And it also keeps something like intramural sports in good perspective. I know that like we are all guys who went to college, right? Like we know that like that's basically our Super Bowl every Tuesday night or whatever at 10 p.m.
Yeah, like 9 or 10 p.m.
There's only so good it can make you feel to like score a touchdown in an intramural flag football game when that same 300-pound guy that you just talked about has put you horizontal like 5 times in a row, like in a practice, where it's just like, I know how many levels there are above me. There's just like, it makes it very fun and very casual, just kind of removes the stakes of it, because it's like, look, I've gotten just totally mixed by guys way better than me before. It's like, it doesn't have to be the Super Bowl, but then, you show up and it's like, I know I've played in bigger environments than this. But for whatever reason, this like Wednesday night, 11 p.m. intramural playoff game is like the most important thing that's ever happened to me. It's like,
it just hits just right.
Yeah, it just hits. Yeah.
And it's always at like midnight. So it's never like 7 o'clock.
It's never at a normal time.
7:30. It's at like 1 o'clock in the morning. We'd play at 10.
It's never a time that makes any sense.
We play at 10 p.m. There was an intramural softball tournament like a couple months ago, and one of the games was scheduled for midnight because there's supposed to be multiple games in a row. We didn't make it.
Yeah, I never made it far enough in the IM playoffs to be playing the overnighters.
Yeah, to get a hotel for camping out at the IM field.
I know, yeah, you bring your tent to the field that day. Yeah,
y'all are tailgating for your 1 o'clock kick.
Right.
It's funny.
Y'all, as like fans of sports in general now, and people who are general, like Ryan, I don't know if you've graduated yet, but it's like, do you guys have relationships with like playing sports yourselves, like post school and stuff like that? Like, what you guys have like a competitive outlet as like out of school sports lovers?
My competitive outlet ended very quickly because it started in the college realm. After I played high school baseball, I got into college, didn't play any collegiate sports, but wanted to play IM football. First game of IM football, jumped, landed, tore my ACL. So it was the most unathletic feeling of my life.
You scored on that play though, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
I did score on that play. But I mean, playing organized sports my whole entire life. I was a catcher, and Ryan's the same thing. I never got any kind of long-term injury more than like a rolled ankle here or there, or like a bum shoulder, like whatever. But playing non-contact co-rec intramural football, not even just a men's league. We were playing everybody, all's welcome. And
it's the just for fun of the just for funs. Yeah.
Exactly. And then the first game just blew my ACL. So I've never touched back in the competitive scene since. I'm still a little scarred to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, for me, I think definitely the gym is like my main competitive outlet. Even though I'm not
You're
really
winning there,
with
man.
anybody.
Yeah.
Nobody wants
That's
to
why
compete
you say
with
he's
you.
not competing.
Ryan's
He's
doing
winning.
it.
Nobody wants to compete with you there.
Yeah, but I get to go there every day. It's fun, But yeah, so I played football and baseball all the way up. It's like until 10th grade, I was playing them all. But baseball was like the sport that was like, my dad played it, I played it. I was so focused on it that like football was my fun sport. That like I still took it really seriously. But I got to go there. I got to work out. It was more exciting. The locker room was just so fun. My best friends were on that team. So I just got to play. And then I got knee surgery going into 10th grade because of baseball from catching my whole life. That I had to quit playing football. And that was like kind of sad. Tragic. I kind of wish I like played again. But I was also super small. So it was like fine. But then when I got into college, I just kept working out because I realized like 11th, 12th grade in baseball that even though I was like playing and I was fine, I was like getting hurt and stuff, I just realized I liked the gym more. So whenever like baseball stopped, I just kept going to the gym every day. And then when intramurals came around, I was like, oh, this is fun. We had a bunch of kids I played baseball with in high school over there. Somehow, I'm a 3-time volleyball champion, reigning champ. I got carried by this kid.
Play a real
There's a kid in Camden Chambers.
Come on, dude. Love it.
He's a Hall of Famer. Camden Chambers is a Hall of Famer at UWF intramural. And he carried me to 3 years in a row there. And the first year we played intramural football, it was me and him and like a couple other friends. But we were kind of like, didn't have a full roster. The whole team wouldn't show up every time. So we were just kind of playing for fun, We were throwing the ball kind of each other. We just take turns playing quarterback. But the next year, another kid we played baseball with transferred into UWF, and he was one of my roommates that year. And then we got a kid that played football at Niceville, and just a few other kids. We actually put together. There was a kid that played in Navarre. We put together like a pretty good team, and we lost the championship though. But it's tragic. Those were like some of the best moments of my life. We're playing a frat, and we're winning 40-0 because we're all like sort of confident. But like, if you're on the field, we're just getting smoked. Yeah. That's what I was asking you, like how good you are.
Well, I mean, football is a team sport, man. I think that one of the things that I like about the kind of everyman nature of like being a football fan, right? Like there's ways that you can be frustrated if you've kind of got the couch quarterback that doesn't know ball, that is like, got really strong opinions, but has like, no backing of any kind of knowledge, otherwise known as, every University of Georgia fan I've ever met, actually. Dude, besides that, like one of the great things about football is there is something about it that like no matter what degree of seriousness you're playing, it kind of retains some of the magic that made somebody like me kind of give my entire like childhood and early young adulthood to it, right? Like it is worth like getting kind of sold out and kind of like really over invested in, even if we're just kind of sitting on the couch watching it, because there is something about it that's like inherently unifying and like communal. And just the kind of like group obsession of it that is really honestly kind of magical. And so like, yeah, it totally makes sense that like an intramural championship is like the most electric environment ever, because that's not like a pretend feeling. Like it actually is. Like it feels like, being at the shoe on Saturday night against Penn State, because it's like, there's something intangible about just how much fun football is that just makes it worth like enjoying to that intensity, like in any situation
with no fans back there.
I don't know why we got the spring game JPEG in the background.
Will has more fans in his room.
It would be because when we set this up, one of the SEC fans here might have been biased, but
it's okay.
And one day,
I'll forgive y'all for the lack. Look, I've been watching your clips. Not enough ACC representation going on. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to plug Stanford versus Cal or whatever. I'm here to plug Virginia.
I was riding for Virginia Tech this year.
Syracuse
Stadium has more fans in that picture, whenever that was, than they've had ever. So that must have been like their most sold out game they've ever had, and he just found that. Like that's what he Google searched.
Yeah, this is like the 2017 Laquan Treadwell Egg Bowl or something like that.
Yeah,
that we got a picture of going on right here.
I had to
Oh, man.
Photoshop a lot more in the back.
Yeah. Those are all just maroon dots back there.
There's
if you
actually
just zoom in.
800 errands back there if you zoom in close enough. Yeah, but
Now,
listen, I mean,
that-
I can't pretend like I played for a school that has this massive stadium. Bobby Dodd seats like around
Mhm.
50,000 people, but it is the oldest stadium in college football, and so I think that does make it the best one. Like it's
By default.
It's like
yeah,
it's like a rule, but it is the first, so it's kind of like, what are we to say?
It's a
We
place
beat
of
a
honor.
community college 222-0 there, and in the World War
Be
I
like
era or
Cumberland or
whatever.
something. Yeah.
It's a great story. I mean, Coach Bobby Dodd had like a personal beef with the guy that was coaching this other team, and because of financial issues, the other school had to shut their program down in the middle of the year. And Bobby Dodd enforced the contract with them, and he said, "I don't care that you shut the program down. You got to play us." And so they just had to grab like guys like off of the street, basically on campus. Bobby Dodd leaves the starters in all 4 quarters. I think they gained like maybe like 3 total yards the whole game or something like that. I don't know. Like this, they're the largest blowout in college football history. Probably somewhat unearned, but iconic. It's iconic.
Yeah, I've been to the stadium one time. It was really nice. When I was in 8th grade, our football coach actually used to play at Georgia Tech, and he took our whole football team there to
Dude,
watch
it's
the game.
electric.
It's pretty
when
cool.
when the flats are packed and a night game, you've got the Atlanta skyline back there. You got Bank of America headquarters lit up in the back corner. There, I mean, it really like college football stadium has its own kind of magic to it, but like, yeah, I mean, Bobby Dodd's very special to me. I've spent a lot of time there when it's empty. I've spent a lot of time there when it's full. It's a pretty special place for sure.
Yellow
Now,
jackets.
Of course.
one perspective that I think you get to bring that a lot of people that are just watching our seasons year in, year out don't get to bring in is that former player side of it. How does that change your fan perspective now?
I think well, for one, I realized I think I left to my own devices. I talk a lot less during games than I used to. If I have it my way in the average game, I probably like would spend it in like absolute like hyper focused silence. Not because I'm like, big braining like the way that I'm understanding this game, but just because like it feels so intense and so personal that it's just like I just want to take it in real time, like as focused as I can. So to that like effect, I kind of watch maybe less football than I used to, where like a Saturday isn't necessarily like every single game that day, but it's like the ones that are most important to me. I'm really locked in for the college football playoff, especially the semifinals, because I'm anti-expansion. 4 teams was enough. Anyway, we'll just let that slide on. But like I'm really locked in for those games. I'm really locked in for Tech games. I grew up and still am. My family's moved around a lot, but I grew up a USC Southern California fan, and I remain really loyal to that franchise today. Fight on platonically, but yeah, I think like really more than anything, I could honestly just boil it down to simply like I just as hard and as rewarding as that kind of really short season of my life was, I love football now a lot more than I used to. And really part of the reason why I left when I did was to kind of like preserve that feeling, and avoid the kind of like trap of maybe overstaying my welcome and leaving feeling like the sport had kind of like cost me something that I didn't want it to cost me, which is just like being able to enjoy it. I took functionally like about a year. Like my season, I didn't really watch any of the college football playoff. Kind of was not super locked in the following year. And then it was kind of like the year after that I was like back, loving college football more than ever. But I think like I have this like personal connection to why I love it now. And so that makes like, maybe the amount of like raw football that I consume a little bit smaller, but my like enjoyment of it like really intense.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything we didn't ask that you wanted to say, or do you have any funny stories or anything to end it?
Well, I guess the only detail that never came up, and I'm shocked it didn't come up because it's kind of like the most important thing that happened to me that semester, is like over the course of like, I kind of told you guys about how I tore my hamstring the day I got my roster spot at Georgia Tech. I also tore my hamstring again that season, towards the end, the week of the Notre Dame game. We were preparing in like mid-October. And I was, that kind of was the end of my football career and stuff like that. And I think that maybe this is just kind of the anecdote to close on, that like situations that are very like frustrating and painful and upsetting kind of always have like this little grain of just like normal life to them, that like you can kind of just look back and be like, oh yeah, there was a way in which like my day-to-day kind of changed there, but nothing really changed, and so the scenario was we were practicing on a Thursday. We had a shorter warm up than normal. It was cold out, and I had been nursing an issue on my other leg. And I was just overcompensating a little bit. Like a grade 2 partial tear in my hamstring that day, but was in the middle of catching a pass and turning upfield and feeling really athletic. And so have the ball punched out of my hands like 30 yards out of bounds. And so I'm thinking like, oh man, this is like a really bad injury. I'm going to be out for the rest of the season. I'm going to get some sympathy, whatever. Next day in the meeting, we get all the way through the meeting. We don't talk about the play at all. And then my coach just like pulls it up at the end of the meeting. He just plays it. He watches the ball fly out of the stands. He just doesn't say anything, just rewinds it, plays the ball fly out of the stands, rewinds it. We probably watch it 5 or 6 times. Everybody's just laughing their heads off at me. They're like, we've never seen somebody fumble this spectacularly before. And I'm sitting there like guys, I fumbled it out of bounds. Like this is like a +2 on the net yardage on the play. Like this is like an inconsequential fumble. And they're like, yeah, but on the contrary, you look like an idiot. Right? So it's just like the film's lost to me for time. I'll never see it again. I don't have access to it. I'm probably glad because it's burdened that I do look pretty stupid in it because it's not obvious that I'm injured. It's just obvious that like I've lost control of the ball and like genuinely like from the right hash into the stands basically. Like I've never seen a ball fly that far. It was like it had been punted, just like completely off the field of play, and then I am still on the field of play on the ground, immobile. But there is the normalcy of being made fun of by your guys for a mistake doesn't go away when that thing happens. That kind of like cuts your season short, and so there is something kind of like nice and humanizing about it. And I don't know if that's a like an interesting story, but if we're looking for something to kind of close out on, that was really the only detail that was like. Yeah, it never came up, but my injury and kind of like being an injured athlete was like a big part of my last like, month and a half, 2 months of that season.
Well, how's your hamstring now?
Connected?
It's connected. It's in one piece. Yeah, I've been fielding a lot of questions about it recently because Luka Doncic suffered the same injury. And I get a lot of friends texting me why he's not back yet. And I'm like, dude, I was not walking for like 2 months. Like if he's back at all, that's incredible. So I've got a lot of press about it.
Dude,
lately,
I've been here.
Yeah. It feels all right now.
I've been here, like me and Luka. Yeah, Luka reached out during the process.
There's very few things athletically that I could say I have in common with Luka Doncic. We've had the same injury, I guess.
Yeah, but you're like right here. I had the same thing. Like last October, I tore my rectus femoris, and then like Jeremiah Smith did too. So I was like, like me and
anything
Jeremiah
you have
Smith,
in common with, probably the best wide receiver in the NFL before he got drafted. So,
Yeah, the old rectum femoris tear happens to them all.
Yeah, I mean,
got a lot of
you gotta watch your
looks at
diet to
Christmas.
protect the rectum femoris. It's dangerous out there.
Yeah, those 8,000 calorie days would not be too good with that rectum tear.
Dude, the 2 pizzas a day with the hot wings. Yeah, the rectum femoris was it was an injury I had to play through, but it was tough out there.
Put in plenty of reps. Yeah.
Dude, 8,000.
Eventually you stop counting. Like you're just like the scale's going up. We're doing something okay.
Yeah.
Now, to close us out here, the last thing I'd ask is for any of the seniors in high school this year that might be fielding offers, looking at this process, for somebody who's already been through it, what piece of advice would you give them?
The worst thing that you can do to your recruiting as a senior in high school is be concerned enough about it that it makes it worse than your junior year. Most people will probably have their offers on tape at that point, and so the senior year game is a little bit inconsequential, where like you might not lose offers, you might not lose roster spots or PWOs from like a slightly regressive senior year. But that is like all of the last like kind of safe high school development you have a chance to do to just be like the best player you can possibly be before you show up in the spring or in the summer or whenever. And so really like I think that that's the kind of like practical advice is like don't let your concern for getting as many offers as possible lead to like a senior year that isn't like as good as it can be. But I think the kind of like hidden just kind of like character advice there is that like the reason I'm grateful I got that advice from my coach to like not forego just like having the best senior year that I possibly could is that football at 18 years old will always feel like the most important thing that's ever happened to you. And it should feel that way, like, because at this point in your life, it probably is the most important thing that's ever happened to you. But 8 years from now, a single extra offer or like a little bit more NIL money if you're really good isn't necessarily worth the things that you will learn by just like doing right by your teammates and trying to go win as many games as possible your senior year of high school, or the things that you'll learn about yourself from just trying to enjoy that last part of the season of life. Like, you don't actually need to rush through this process as a person, as a player, as like a member of a team. The people around you deserve better than that. You definitely deserve better than that. I mean, I think that like if you really are able to trust the people around you with your recruiting process, let them know what your goals are, ask them regularly to help you with them, and just focus on being the best player that you can possibly be at the thing that you are right now. Once you get to that next thing, whether it's like, you know, walking on at a big school for a year, being a mainstay at a small school, never playing football again, like those are the things that, like, regardless of what path ends up happening, like, are the things that you definitely won't regret, right? Like, you might regret like obsessing over the process too much when you've got something really great in front of you, which is, you know, high school football, the chance to play in college, teammates that mean a lot to you, all those kind of things.
I'm inspired. I want to go brush off my junior and senior tape now and
yeah.
Yeah,
Play the
let us
huddle
know if
highlights.
there's
Yeah.
any teams looking for a walk-on that's 35 years old and out of shape.
Unarchive my huddle tape from 2017. Yeah, well, hey, I've had a great time today, y'all. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
It's been a lot of fun to talk about.
We need to do a follow-on video and get you out next time you're here on the field, and we can go brush off those cleats and, you know, get you back to work. Maybe.
Yeah, we could show just how fast you are on the field. You'll have me to compare to, so you'll look downright speed.
Guys, the rust is probably pretty rusty.
But you can.
I've been out of school for a year now.
It'd be cool to have you walk us through like a day in the weight room that you went through, or like a day out and like your like if your tight end room drills, like your just tight end room drills, we could run those like on a and like.
Well, y'all would kill that. I'm gonna have to train for that to make sure I don't look too rusty. You know.
Yeah, we'll keep Ryan at home that day for the lifting segment.
Yeah, Ryan can be sick that day.
Ryan's gonna be like, guys, playing college football is easy.
Yeah. No. We could do like a simulated day. Yeah, like that'd be so fun.
That'd be crazy.
When you're home, we'll get the tape. We'll get it going.
Listen, yeah, I love the stuff we are doing here.
If you're willing.
Oh, dude, of course.
Well, no matter what we do together in the future with it, we will be doing something because this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for coming on. This was a great insight into it. I'm sure anybody listening that hadn't played learned a lot from your stories here and got to see a different side of the college athlete than maybe we just see on a Saturday clip. So do you have anything that you wanted to shout out? Where can people find you? Anything that you're working on that you want people to check out?
There's things that I'm working on. There's things that people could check me out on. There's things that I'm working on in my job that I can't talk about because of NDAs. The only thing I want to say is the good word, which is to hell with Georgia. Freaking hate those guys. How about them dogs? Piss on them every single day.
Me too.
We hate those guys. We don't have anything nice to say about them. If you're watching this show and you're a Dogs fan, unfollow, unsubscribe. Nobody wants you. We're blocking you. This is official Run After Cast messaging. Everybody feels this way in this room exhaustively. Your business is not required.
Maybe next week you can come back and
next week you can follow back.
Have a different perspective.
I'd be like, oh, and next week we're bringing on Kirby Smart. And I'm like, wow, I really did not.
Bring on for the clapping time.
Well, you heard it.
I also hate Georgia. Chandler, you should too, because
they did. Marvin Harris. I haven't forgotten about that.
It's okay.
You would have been national champions that year if it wasn't for
JSN had that torn hamstring as well. It must have been going around. You gave it to him.
Well, his cleats are too big.
Here we go.
His cleats are too
Close
big.
this out. I'm not getting this conversation with Teal.
Yeah. So before I lose these two to another couple hours of arguing cleat sizes, we'll go ahead and let you all know. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Please go to our social media pages, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, follow us on there. That's a huge help to keep us growing. All the links for that will be found on the link tree in the description of the episode. Also, if you can review the episode on whatever podcast streaming platform you listen to us on, it's also another huge part to unlocking the algorithm and getting us up in front of more people. Those of you that have done it, thank you. Those of you that will, thank you as well. But until next week, we'll continue on with talking football until the season starts. So until next time.